Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I am Lee Camp, joined by the always amazing Eleanor Goldfield. Eleanor? Eleanor? Oh, sorry. Just remembered. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today, but she will be back next week. To have no fear. Big show, important show today. Also, tonight or today, depending on where you live, what time zone, because there is no universal tonight. Tonight is what we make it, because for other people it's today. Anyway, episode 2 of Unredacted Tonight comes out tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. I hope you will enjoy it. I hope you will check it out. It's arguable, but I think it's better than the first episode. So check that out. But I'll talk a little more about that later. Let's get into it all, though. The garbage being pumped out by President Mump, it's my new name for Musk Trump. President Mump is unbelievable just how much garbage they can pump out all at the same time. And yes, for those of you who are like new to my stuff, yeah, it's great that he's ending the proxy war in Ukraine. It does seem to be headed that way. Absolutely, that should happen. It should have happened, I don't know, before it ever started. So yes to that. And there are certain things that I'm not going to get too whiny and upset about, such as the ending of USAID, which is basically a coup machine around the world with 6,000 propagandists paid by USAID to push forward the bullshit of the U.S. empire. Excited to see those so-called journalists lose their job. However, most of what Trump and Musk are doing is just garbage. It's just garbage to further enrich the rich and to create ethnic cleansing in Gaza and to continue the ethnic cleansing in Gaza that the Biden administration oversaw and facilitated for over a year. And in that area, in that realm, the latest thing that President Mump has pumped out, the latest garbage, is this video that apparently Trump reposted it. So he didn't necessarily create it, but whatever. It doesn't really matter who. It's an AI video. It doesn't really matter who created it. I'm going to show it here, but I'm not going to play the stupid royalty-free music that's on it. So I'll just show the visuals. For those of you listening to the podcast, if you haven't seen this, you should check it out. It is a AI video of what. Oh wait, there goes the music. After I said I wouldn't. There we go. What's next in Gaza? And it shows them walking into like a Dubai level resort retreat. It shows an AI created Elon Musk that is like way younger and more fit than Elon Musk and appears to have real hair, et cetera, et cetera. It shows that. It then shows just like golden heads of Trump for some odd reason. It also hilariously shows like cross-dressing dancers or I don't know, trans dancers or whatever they're called, but which is very not, it doesn't seem to fit with Trump's brand. I think it's great, but it just doesn't seem like Trump. Anyway, but then it shows a golden Trump head on a balloon. Because that's what, that is actually, that part's true, is when people have been ethnically cleansed by a strong man of sorts, they always love him. They're always very excited that they have had their lives destroyed, their area where they live in the world completely razed and paved over and put expensive casinos in. They're always very excited about that. So they tend to walk around balloons of said strongman. That's very true. Then they show yachts and giant buildings and everything on the coast. And the assumption is that not only is this what Gaza could be turned into if you just get rid of all the surly Gazans, if you just get rid of 2 million people, then it would be awesome. This is so eugenics, so Nazi-ish, if not straight up Nazi, if not straight up Nazi, it's Nazi-ish. This idea that if you just get rid of mainly the non-white people, but we'll just say whatever group, fill in whatever group, then things would be great. This whole world would just be yachts and blue water. It would just be yachts and blue water if just we could get rid of fill in the blank, whichever group we're hating on, whichever group we're genociding, whichever group we're ethnically cleansing. And in this case, it's Gazans. Then all the blue water would come back. That's exactly what would happen. And it also, this video also works with under the assumption that like Gazans, Palestinians have just failed to make Gaza what it should be, which is an awesome beach resort. They've just failed to do this because they haven't really, I don't know, worked hard enough, or they don't want to. They spend all their money on bombs. Oh, those rascals. When in fact, if you know anything about Gaza and you know how it's worked since its inception as a refugee camp, Israel has control. So way before October 7th, forget about the past year, way before that, Israel has controlled everything that comes in and out of Gaza for the most part. Sure, some things can be smuggled in here or there, but you can't actually bring massive construction equipment in through smuggled tunnels. So Israel's controlled just about everything that goes in and out of Gaza, medical supplies, food, construction equipment, all of it. And that's why even in past bombings, when Israel would bomb Gaza, they can't really rebuild, or they can't rebuild easily because they don't have the supplies for doing that type of thing, because Israel controls all of that. So this idea that, oh, Gaza just failed to make this an awesome beach resort is just so pathetic and just straight up propaganda. And then it's just people dancing in money, because that's what happens after ethnic cleansing. It rains money. Did you know that? It rains money after ethnic cleansing. I don't know if you knew that. And by the way, the children they show dancing seem strikingly white. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating that they all became white? Oh, there's Elon Musk eating again. For some odd reason, the young, actually fit Elon Musk just is always eating in this video. Then there's a golden statue of Donald Trump, because people just they love a genocide, love the guy heading up the genocide. Then it says Trump Gaza, and then it's Elon Musk walking through rivers of money, which he actually could do that. And then again, this seems a little out of Trump's normal branding. They show a remarkably accurate, overwhelmingly obese Donald Trump and Netanyahu lounging in beach chairs. So you know what? I'll bet you money this AI video was created by Elon Musk because it shows all this horrific shit, but it's accurate body size of Donald Trump. Yet there's two versions of Elon Musk in this video, both of which are like 100 pounds lighter than Elon Musk is. Yeah, so that's the video. And of course, people are horrified by it. And there's just a few, there's not a lot to be said about it that hasn't been said in a lot of even mainstream media. But here are a couple of notes. One is part of Trump or President Mump's strategy for how to get everything they want, which is, to crush any opposition and to continue to enrich the rich, which is as if that needs doing, as if the rich in this country, as if the Elon Musks who have $400 billion and could never spend a quarter of that, could never spend a single % of that. Like they need more money. They need more yachts. They need more planes. What is it Elon Musk doesn't have that he needs? And that's the definition of sociopathy, which is why I'm going to keep coming back to sociopath test. Every position of any kind of power, sociopath test. It's a real thing. There are sociopaths. They tests. They exist and they work, and they can tell you if someone's a sociopath. And all those people wiped off I wasn't going to say wiped off the planet. I was going to say wiped off the roles of people that could ever be in these positions. Thank you, 11th Hour, for supporting the show. Really appreciate that. Everybody, you can always support the show via Super Chat. Even if you're not watching this live, you can hit the thanks button, support it that way. But the best way to support the show is leecamp.net, my locals page, or patreon.com/leecamp. There's also, I have a new Substack. There's also a way to sign up as a member on Substack, but I have not been pushing that as much. Anyway, but to get back to, there's two things that I think are a little more important about this video. One is they are kind of like, they're flooding media with this kind of garbage, with false stories, such as I covered it yesterday or 2 days ago, the Elon Musk and Donald Trump saying there's thousands, or maybe it said millions, I can't remember, but at least hundreds of thousands of dead people receiving money from Social Security. And if you actually look at the numbers and break down what it is, there's maybe 13 dead people receiving money from Social Security, which is like 0.00001% of Social Security names. Anyway, so they are flooding us all. They're flooding the world, but they're flooding the nation. They're flooding us all with garbage, lies, sometimes things that they don't even intend to do. I mean, we won't yet know which ones turned out to be ridiculous things that Trump said and ridiculous things that he didn't even try and effort himself towards, despite saying them. Who knows if he's actually going to cut the military budget like he said he's going to. So far, there's no proof of that. Hegseth said he was going to cut the budget, but in fact, he was going to reallocate it to different parts of the Pentagon, which is not cutting anything. So they're flooding us with this, and it makes it nearly impossible to fight it all or to even be informed on it all. And this type of distraction, the AI video of how we're going to pave over Gaza, it really does a good job of, it's the shiny object that everyone then turns to. And I don't even know if I'd be covering it if it weren't A, hilarious, and B, that I want to talk about how they successfully use the shiny objects to get us to not care about often the real stories, the most important stories. Like their efforts to gut Social Security, and so many other things. But that doesn't mean that all the media talks about it as shiny objects. Some of the things they're talking about, they're just flat out wrong about, but it is useful. But another aspect of this is, and a strategy by President Mump, is a poly crisis. To also not just create so much information and disinformation that you don't know what's up from down, but to also just literally throw the country and the people into so many crises. I mean, we're in a lot of crises anyway, but to throw us into so many crises that, again, you don't know what to fight or where to direct your energy. And often people, when they're overwhelmed like that, when there's too much to deal with, how can I fight against Trump saying he's going to steal Greenland at the same time I'm fighting against Trump saying he wants to support the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, at the same time Trump saying he's going to deport everybody whose name isn't John Smith? It really is difficult. And that's part of the strategy. The strategy for getting us to give up and go home. A lot of people, what I was going to say a second ago, a lot of people tend to then revert back into just like, I want security for me and my family. And how do I get that? Well, the ruling elite will often tell you, you get that by hating immigrants. But point your finger at the immigrants and go get them. And then so a lot of people go, okay, it all comes back to the immigrants. Or you know what? If everything, I know it's overwhelming. It's a lot to handle. It's breaking us all down. It's just so much we're facing. If we could just stop trans story times, I think pretty much everything, all the other dominoes would fall. Pretty much everything else would just be fine. If we could just stop the trans story times, I think we'd all be doing pretty well. I think the plastics would be out of the ocean. I think the planet wouldn't be heating up. I think that the richest billionaires in the world wouldn't control things. We wouldn't have sociopaths at the top of every system. And it would all be fine if we just stop the trans story times. And they really are trying to flood you with these poly crises. And of course, we have real poly crises right now. Is it called polycrisis? And I guess maybe it's called a polycrisis. Maybe I have that wrong. Because I guess it's a single polycrisis. It's multiple crises. And this conversation, I mean, these past few sentences are really a crisis because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But we are in an age of transition, a massive age of transition. And Trump is just kind of speeding up the breakdown of so much of society. We're in an empire that is dwindling, and he is creating wars, economic or otherwise, around the world. Now, some people go, no, he's stopping the world wars. He's stopping the proxy war in Ukraine. That is true, and I heavily support that. And I've talked about the proxy war in Ukraine endlessly. So I have made it clear I support ending the proxy war in Ukraine. But he is creating, whether they're hot wars or not, he is creating further wars, economic wars. He is speeding up the economic war with China. Joe Biden didn't back off that at all, right? If the Democrats were actually a different thing from Trump, then once Trump got out of office, Biden gets into office, you ease tensions with China. You get together with China. You say, we need to work as a team here, team humanity, right? But none of that happened under Biden. It just kept going down the road, and now Trump's speeding it up. Here's another battle he's creating with various nations because, they want to throw so much at you that you can't figure out how to fight it. Oh, yeah, and I should let you know that later in this episode, I'm going to bring the story of Max Blumenthal, founder and editor of The Gray Zone, was harassed and basically interrogated by Customs and Border Patrol when he arrived back at the airport, at Dulles Airport the other day. So we'll be discussing that in a few minutes as well. But here's another country they're going at. They've now re-upped the furious bullshit war against Cuba. Every year the UN, just about every year the UN has a vote on whether to end the blockade of Cuba, whether Cuba has done anything wrong to deserve to have a continued blockade of their country. And every year, the only two countries that vote to continue the blockade of Cuba, I believe it's the U.S. and Israel, are the two countries that vote to continue that. I think there was one year where they successfully pressured Ukraine to vote to continue the blockade of Cuba. But this is their latest thing. One of the things that Cuba is known for, and in a very positive light, and it's one of the only ways that they interact with countries around the world on a real regular basis, is these doctor exchanges where they send. Cuba has one of the best healthcare systems, better than the United States. They have, by the way, a longer life expectancy than the United States. This is a country that has a far smaller and struggling economy because we try and crush their economy, and yet longer life expectancy. What does that tell you? And so their doctors are excellent, and they go around the world to help countries that need doctors. Either they lack doctors, or they lack the know-how, or lack the education, whatever it is. And they've been doing this for years and years. And Marco Rubio has just put sanctions, or has announced sanctions, against Cuba's medical missions. The Trump administration is under fire this week for expanding a visa restriction policy that targets Cuba's medical missions around the globe. It says world. I just felt like globe sounded better. I don't know why. Which U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio described as forced labor. I'm sorry. I have a good time with it. It makes me chuckle their propaganda, because it's like they're like, how do we make doctors going to help really sick people sound bad? Well, one thing they've tried before is they've said these doctors don't actually help anyone, which if you actually talk to the countries that bring them over, utterly not true. So they're like, well, that kind of gets debunked fairly easily. You just go talk to the countries. So what else can we say about helping countries with doctors? It's forced labor. Yes. Have you noticed that Cuba's doctors always show up with chains around their wrists and ankles? It's so stupid. This expanded policy. Oh, this is Rubio speaking. He says, this expanded policy applies to current or former Cuban government officials and other individuals, including foreign government officials who are believed to be responsible for or involved in the Cuban labor export program. Cuban labor export program, particularly Cuba's overseas medical missions. Rubio said this policy also applies to the immediate family of such persons. Medea Benjamin, co-founder of the U.S.-based peace group Code Pink, and Medea Benjamin, been on the show many times, friend of mine, and the only time I've been to Cuba, I went for about a week with Medea Benjamin. So she leads, it was a while back, probably, I want to say 7-8 years ago. She leads trips to Cuba. She lived there for a while, way back. Maybe in the 80s or something. And she leads trips to Cuba so people can see it and experience it. And it was an amazing trip. And anyway, she's also the co-founder of Code Pink. But most importantly, friend of this show. That's the most important thing. She said, this is pure evil, punishing people who help provide health care to poor people around the world. Pure evil. That's what's written inside of Marco Rubio's underwear, isn't it? As Reuters reported Wednesday, even Reuters said this. And Reuters is like a pro-Western, often propaganda rag, but it depends. They have their days. Since its 1959 leftist revolution, Cuba has dispatched an army of whitecoats to disaster sites and disease outbreaks around the world in the name of solidarity. In the last decade, they have fought cholera in Haiti and Ebola in West Africa. And the Ebola that they fought in West Africa, you recall, this was like 10 years ago, the U.S. even sent some doctors to West Africa to fight Ebola, far fewer than Cuba, but it became a political item. And then I think it was Republicans, certain Republicans were like, this is horrific. These people should never be allowed back in the country because they went to help with Ebola and all this. It was basically like, don't help any other country deal with something like Ebola. Meanwhile, Cuba was like the saving grace. They were the ones that were actually saving people while we flipped out because we had one doctor go over there or whatever it was. And weirdly, just through a weird twist of fate, my partner at the time, she worked in an office. Her coworker was the wife of the doctor that came back to like New Jersey or whatever, and everyone flipped the hell out. So they, when it was discovered, they locked them down and they were like in their apartment for, I think, like a month or something, like literally couldn't step outside the apartment. It was so insane. Like other countries have ways of dealing with stuff like this and don't lose their minds in such an insane way. Anyway, Venezuela analysis noted Wednesday. By the way, if you ever want good media, like information on Venezuela, Venezuela analysis does great work. Noted Wednesday that according to official figures, Cuban doctors in Venezuela numbered as many as 30,000, with approximately 255,000 serving in the country since the start of the program, following a deal signed by Venezuela President Hugo Chavez and Cuban President Fidel Castro in the year 2000, primarily working in low-income barrios. Cuba has been targeted by U.S. sanctions for decades, and although former President Biden notified Congress of his intent to remove the island nation from the state sponsors of terrorism, of all the countries you could name that are sponsoring, that might be sponsoring terrorism, Cuba is the last on the list. Cuba is not sponsoring terrorism, but we do that. We just put them on the list because it helps us to put sanctions on them and try and screw them and try and harm their people. So we just say, the terrorist country. Of course, the biggest terrorist country in the world for many years now has been, wait for it, the United States. We killed 6 million people in the global war on terror alone in 20 years. 6 million. We've killed millions more if you're talking about Vietnam and Korea and all of that after World War II, not to mention dropping the atom bombs that didn't need to be dropped. Thank you, Mike, for the comment. Mike's asking about a podcast for Unredacted tonight. It very well could happen, Mike. There's a few iffy reasons for it. There's a few reasons a little more difficult than just grabbing the audio and throwing it on. One is the audio would be rather annoying, I think, because it has a bunch of swoops and things like sounds that on audio, like if you're not watching the images, would be you'd keep hearing the noises and be like, what the hell is that? So that would not be cool. So we have to remove those. Not the end of the world. But then on top of that, I just don't know about creating a whole new podcast right now. I've got like 5. So we'll see. Maybe down the road. Thank you for asking, though. I am working on it. Vicky, thank you for supporting Unredacted Tonight, episode 2 tonight. But so Cuba's been talking, called it state-sponsored terrorism. Biden, at the end of his term, so like months ago, or a month ago, said he was going to remove them from the list. But Trump swiftly reversed that decision and restored a list of restricted entities created during the Republicans' first term. Couple of things here. It's tempting to go, oh, Donald Trump is doing this horrible thing to Cuba, and Joe Biden was doing the right thing because he was taking them off the state sponsors of terrorism. But let's remember that Biden had 4 years to do that. He waited till the last week. He waited till the last week to say he was going to ease things on Cuba. Furthermore, Obama, at the end of his, towards the end of his reign, we'll call it, towards the end of his time in office, eased tensions with Cuba. That was great. That was wonderful that happened at the end of Obama. Trump gets into office, does the exact opposite. Biden then comes along. Does he undo all the things Trump did, all the restrictions, all the sanctions? Fucking no. He left almost everything on against Cuba. Almost everything was still there to try and harm Cuba during Biden's entire 4 years. Thank you, Izzy Dizzy, for the donation, for help and support the show. Really appreciate it. Okay, well, let me show. So this is the insanity going after Cuba, this wonderful island nation. And all this gets back to really just 2 things. Maybe 3, but it's really mainly 2. One is the U.S. has never gotten over the butthurt of like the yoke, the chains, the stranglehold the U.S. had on Cuba was so strong, and the revolution threw it off, and we've never gotten over that. We were like, Cuba's our island to exploit. How dare they have their own country? We have never gotten over that. We've never gotten over the fact that they ally more with socialist countries instead of the United States. But also, it's the threat of the good example. You have a country where there's zero homelessness, even though they're not a rich country. You have a country where they have a longer life expectancy, even though they're not a rich country. You have a country where they have better medicine and hospitals, even though it's not a rich country. You have a country where most studies show that they're happier people than the United States, even though they're not a rich country. You have a country where housing, I said no homelessness, but housing's guaranteed. You have a country where university is guaranteed. You have a country where jobs are guaranteed. You're guaranteed employment. So, and the idea that we could do that is that could be something that happens in this world is the threat of the good example. You can't let people see that. Okay, so here is a protest in Cuba against these latest moves by Trump. Gotta be tens of thousands, if not millions of people there, but I mean, now it's millions? But definitely tens of thousands of people protesting these moves by Donald Trump. And the people of Cuba also like Americans. Like, they love America and they love Americans. They just hate the American government. And it's like they most of them, and I'm speaking in generalities. There are some who hate their government, but in every country. But most of the people I saw and spoke with, they have learned why the US government is wrong and why the US government goes after Cuba, but they blame the government for that. They don't blame you and me. They like us. They like Americans. Most of them have cousins in America and family in America, and they just don't want to be controlled by the United States. Shocking. Shocking, I know. Okay, let's get to what happened to Max Blumenthal the other day. Just a quick reminder, tonight is episode 2 of Unredacted Tonight, my new comedy news show. Episode 1 was really well received, so I'm excited about that. And I would love for you guys, it's free to watch, so I'd love for you guys to support the show simply by watching it and sharing it. Like, that is step 1 in supporting the show. If you want to see this show continue, because it is a huge effort, I lose a lot of money by doing it. But if you want to see it happen and keep going, it's weekly, comes out Thursdays. Then step 1 to supporting it is just watching it and sharing it and telling people that Redacted Tonight is back. Except it's called Unredacted Tonight, and it's completely independent. I'm putting in the chat here, linktree.com/Lee Camp is probably the easiest way to find it. It's at the top. It's going to be at the top of my Twitter. It's going to be on my Instagram. It's going to be everywhere. But I think the easiest thing to remember maybe is linktree.com/Lee Camp. Okay. So just the other day, Max Blumenthal, who I've interviewed many times, he came back from Nicaragua, from a vacation in Nicaragua, and here's his story. And I said earlier, but he is the founder and editor of Gray Zone, which has done amazing journalism. One of their biggest topics that they cover very well is Israel. As I approached the customs line at Dulles International Airport early on the morning of February 24th, a man called out to me, Mr. Blumenthal. He identified himself as Customs and Border Protection. By the way, I changed it, but I haven't changed the thumbnail. So accidentally in the thumbnail, it says the FBI harassed Max Blumenthal. It should be Customs and Border Protection. Sorry about that. And led me into a cavernous secondary screening room where he treated me to a strange and disconcerting questioning session. I had just returned from a trip to Nicaragua with my family, during which we participated in no political activities. But the agent's line of questioning suggested federal authorities had little interest in my visit to Nicaragua. The guy said, "This is just a friendly exchange." You know, when you're harassed by federal agents and in a friendly exchange, you know how that is. He said, "You're not a target or anything." Isn't that what they always say to people when they're a target? You're not a target. Standing across from me at a metal desk, the agent asked me to fill out a questionnaire with my personal info and details of my trip. As soon as I completed the form, he flipped it over and displayed a handwritten list of a handful of names. "Do you know any of these people?" he asked. 2 of those listed were Anglo names, Nicole Smith and Susan Benjamin. The other 3 were extremely common Muslim names. I cannot recall them all. He wouldn't let me take a photo of it. I've learned from activists and journalists who've experienced similar probing that federal agents often deploy inane or disingenuous questions to get their subject talking, then attempt to manipulate or entrap them so they can implicate them in a crime. Basically, you ask them a bunch of easy questions or questions that they aren't afraid of so that they get comfortable. They think, oh, this isn't a big deal. And then you say, do you know this person? And then suddenly they're kind of thrown off guard. Their guard was not up. They didn't think it was a big deal. And now, oh my God, I'm being questioned about who I know. He continues, in fact, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that police are allowed to lie to elicit confessions from suspects. Sure, why not? I mean, everyone else is lying. It's what our president does on a daily basis. So why shouldn't we all be lying? It is amazing they have no shame, like Trump and Musk and all them, like no shame to just be gut-wrenchingly wrong. Like so wrong you have to double over laughing at how wrong they are. Like Elon Musk saying all these thousands of people who are 150 years old getting Social Security. And 2 seconds, you can Google it and find out what the truth is, that there's maybe 13 people that are dead. So, 120 years old, but they're dead. Maybe 13 people still receiving Social Security because I guess a family member is, stealing it or something. 13. And they're acting like there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of dead people getting so. It's just like to be that wrong and not just humiliated by it. I like occasionally I get something wrong and then I, apologize or explain why I got it wrong. It's pretty rare, I'll be honest. Pretty rare. But like you look dumb and I ain't looking dumb, so I don't want to get things wrong. It's like these guys they're lying and they get it wrong intentionally all the time. Trump said inject bleach into your veins on national television. Anyway, the agent then informed us we were free to go. Once we basically left the room, they Googled some of the names. They found out that Susan Benjamin was the birth name of our friend Medea Benjamin, who I brought up earlier. A big supporter of Cuba, co-founder of Code Pink. The following day, I informed Medea about my encounter at Dulles and asked if she had experienced anything similar. She told me there was a period when she was harassed by federal authorities every time she traveled out of the country. The FBI once dispatched an officer to meet her at the airport upon a return from a trip and called her on several occasions in an unsuccessful attempt to solicit a meeting. She said the harassment stopped after she filed a series of complaints, but my experience has led her to believe it will begin again. The interaction felt like an act of political harassment. And yeah, I mean, that's what this is. This serves two purposes. One is to go after some people adjacent to Max Blumenthal, like Medea Benjamin. But I think more importantly, it's to make people scared, especially journalists, activists. Like, they don't need to arrest you to put it in your head that you could be arrested. They don't need to separate you from your family to put it in your head that you could be separated from your family. So Max, who has founded and runs a successful journalism outlet called The Gray Zone, he now has to think about the fact like, oh, every time I fly, I might be arrested. Maybe I'll just be arrested for 10 hours. Maybe I'll be arrested for years. Who knows? Who knows what this country's about now? And of course, many other Gray Zone writers and contributors have been arrested and harassed. And I'll get to that. He gets to that in the article in a minute. This harassment seemed to signal an escalation against journalists and activists who've expressed anti-war, anti-Zionist views. I can only speculate on what the Fed's ultimate objective was. However, I know of several anti-war activists who have had FBI agents appear at their doors over the past several months asking questions about Iran and individuals with Muslim or Arab names. Journalists like Ali Amunima, Asa Winnstaley, and Richard Medhurst, and I covered all of those when they happened. Ali Amunima and Asa Winnstaley both work, and Ali is one of the creators of Electronic Intifada. I've also had Ali Amunima on Redacted Tonight, I believe. And Richard Medhurst, who, of course, I've interviewed many times. Richard Medhurst has been arrested twice. One time in Britain, he was held for 24 hours. The latest time he was had his whole place turned upside down by Austrian authorities for covering Gaza, for being a journalist about Gaza and about the genocide that's happening there. They've been subjected to police raids, imprisonment, and even criminal prosecution for the opinions they've expressed on Israel-Palestine. My colleague at the Gray Zone, Kit Clarenberg, was detained by British counter-terror cops and grilled for hours about his journalism on London's machinations in Ukraine and beyond. Another one of our contributors, Jeremy Lafredo, spent several days in an Israeli prison and was ordered to self-deport after authorities falsely accused him of assisting an enemy during wartime. Jeremy Lafredo, I covered that when it happened as well. They were threatening him with life in prison for doing journalism in Israel, basically where he just covered that Iran had missiles had landed in, I think, Tel Aviv. And basically for covering that, which, by the way, NPR also covered, for covering that, they arrested him and said they might pursue life in prison in Israel. Apparently, I didn't know him well, but apparently I also worked I was at RT America at the same time as Jeremy Lafredo. I do recognize him and remember him, but I didn't know him very well. Anyway, that's what happened to Max, and seems to be happening to every member of the Gray Zone. And by the way, if you want to be kept up to date on Gray Zone articles, we often have them on radindymedia.com, which is our news site that Eleanor and I created, completely free, radindymedia.com. But this story is, it's a lot better than it could be. It's not like Max spent days in prison, but it is meant to create a chilling effect, to slow down journalism, to stop people from reporting successfully on these issues. Weirdly, they go after each of us in different ways. I have not been attacked in the way that any of those Gray Zone journalists have, because I'm not a journalist in the sense of what they call original reporting, right? I'm reporting on the reports. I'm reporting on what Gray Zone reported. I'm not, in Gaza on the ground covering this stuff, and so it kind of removes me by one level, but from from being a reporter in that way. However, the way I've been attacked, which many of them have not, is just the incredible shadow banning. Like, I'm not saying they're not suppressed a little for covering Gaza and stuff, but it doesn't seem like it's nearly at the level that my shadow banning is, where you can have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, like my Facebook, of subscribers, and none of them ever see anything. Like, none of them see my posts in, I think, 5 years. So it's interesting they go after us in different ways. Okay, so this next story actually is a bit of a teaser for tonight, for the second episode of, excuse me, second episode of Unredacted Tonight. In this second episode of Unredacted Tonight, I cover China, how it is that China's beating the United States, but I also cover the Israel and the Hannibal Directive and many other things. And I think you'll really love the episode, but I'm not going to be able to get this into the show tonight because it just came out today. However, here is more evidence of the Hannibal Directive. And if you want the full breadth of all of the information that proves that Israel murdered hundreds of their own citizens, hundreds of Israelis on October 7th, then watch Unredacted tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. But here is an article that just came out today, further proving this. This is from the Jerusalem Post. And I think it's important that, the Jerusalem Post is an Israeli outlet that is very pro-Israel. Very pro-Israel. And yet, Israeli media has largely admitted the Hannibal Directive, whereas the U.S. acts like it doesn't exist and never admits that the Hannibal Directive has happened. For those of you who don't know, I think most of you do, the Hannibal Directive is when Israel, the IDF, decides just kill everyone. Because it's better for us if everyone dies than if we have some hostages taken. And so they put out a directive to just slaughter everyone. Hostages, hostage takers, Hamas, Palestinians, Israelis, children, older people, didn't matter. Everyone. Just kill them all. And that order was sent out on October 7th. And you might think that Israel would never admit it, but you have some internal people. Yoav Gallant admitted it the other day. I covered that, the former defense minister. But here's the Jerusalem Post, a pro-Israel outlet, saying IDF carried out Hannibal Directive. This came out today, this article. The Israeli Air Force was carrying out a new Sword of Damocles operation, that's the code name, as it was carrying out the Hannibal Directive, the IDF's probes found. And interestingly, in this article, they don't spend a lot of time on the Hannibal Directive. It's just kind of assumed now, because it has been covered many times, that it happened, that Israel killed a lot of their own people. Who knows how many? Hundreds? 1,000? But they say the Air Force was carrying out the Sword of Damocles operation, a code name only being revealed on Thursday for the first time, to attack many Hamas commanders and their headquarters at about 10:30 a.m. on October 7th, just as it was also carrying out the Hannibal Directive of gunning down, quote, anything that moved around the Israel-Gaza border. And what was happening near the Israel-Gaza border? The Nova Music Festival. And there was a call out to the IDF to kill anything that moved. Does that sound like the kind of thing you're getting from your mainstream media? And most of this article, I don't even find it that interesting, but a lot of it's basically saying the Air Force had their hands full because they were also attacking Hamas commanders. Okay, I think that's kind of the not real big news here. The big news is they were murdering tons of Israelis. The Air Force would carry out ultimately around 945 attacks with helicopters firing 11,000 rounds. So here they are admitting it again. And this is the type of stuff where when I cover it and when so many others cover it, we're called lunatics. We're called the conspiracy theorists. And you have just about every mainstream outlet, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, News Nation, all of them saying Hamas killed 1,200 people, 1,200 Israelis on October 7th. And yet we have articles like this one in pro-Israel rags admitting Israel killed a lot of Israelis on October 7th. That is included in that 1,200 number. So when you hear Hamas killed 1,200 people, it is provably, absolutely false. We don't know how many Hamas did kill. We will never figure out that number. But the 1,200 includes every Israeli the IDF killed. So for a lot more on that, also comedy. Check out Unredacted tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. That's when it premieres. You can watch it anytime after. It's free to watch. And if you can't find the link and you're wondering where to go, linktree.com/LeeCamp is the top one there, top link there. So another way to get the emails, because I do send out emails alerting people, is to text the word unredacted to 33777 if you're in the US. Mr. Dizzy says, my brother thinks 40 beheaded to this day. You're referring to the 40 beheaded babies or whatever it was, which has been so aggressively debunked. There were exactly 2 babies or infants that died or were killed on October 7th. So not only could there not be 40 because there's only 2, but neither of them were beheaded. One was a fetus that died when the mother was shot, and another was a 1-year-old or less than 1-year-old who got shot in a crossfire. And yeah, those are horrible and tragic. They're also not 40 beheaded babies. That is just so stupid. And you have people like Bill Maher saying he saw videos and stuff. It's just garbage. But these people are professional liars. That's what they do. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, Trump is also going to war with Europe. Not like hot war, but just going to Cold War with Europe. And here's the other part of the technique which Trump's using right now is if you threaten Canada, Mexico, Europe with all these tariffs, and then you decrease that amount by just a little bit, like, okay, we're not going to put 25% tariffs, we'll take 10%. Often these countries will be so relieved that you only put a 10% tariff. You also can get a lot of other things from them by threatening them with tariffs. Now, Trump got concessions from Mexico and Canada to delay the tariffs. However, he's now going forward with them anyway. So it's not like Canada and Mexico got much out of bending over backwards for Trump. Anyway, Trump to impose 25% tariffs on the EU says it was formed to screw the United States And by the way, this all just reeks of a waning empire, a collapsing empire. We are just, these people want to maintain their control of the globe, their hegemony. They're losing it. They're losing it every day by day. And their response is to go after everyone, is to try and just steal money from everyone, make life and the world difficult for everyone so that the U.S. can maintain hegemony. And it's not going to work. You're losing, you idiots. Trump says, we have made a decision and we'll be announcing it very soon. Trump said the tariffs would apply to all things but certain car imports specifically. Let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States, Trump said. That's the purpose of it. The EU predecessor organizations were launched in the wake of World War II to ensure peaceful cooperation on the continent. Their gradual economic integration has included the development of the widely shared currency, the euro, and free movement across many national borders. And I think largely the EU has served the purpose of allowing cooperation between many of those countries so that they're not at each other's throats. But the creation of the euro was at least partially done in order to take economic policy out of the individual states' hands. Like, Greece does not have full control of their economic policy because they're using a currency that is connected to all of the rest of the EU. And when you do that, often it means that whatever government gets elected and put into power there, they often cannot change economic policy to help their people. Instead, they've got to pay all this egregious debt, and it just screws people. Forced austerity. I mean, Greece has seen forced austerity on their people in a large way. And the euro was partially created to take economic policy out of the hands, like basically keep it in the hands of the bankers and take it out of the hands of individual nations. And it's worked. But that's not, of course, that doesn't concern Trump. Trump doesn't care about that. Asked about possible retaliatory taxes by the EU, which now consists of 27 member countries, Trump said simply, they can try, but they can't. Oh, I think they can. Trump has delayed a 25% tariff he was set to impose on imports from Canada and Mexico. Trump said Wednesday that the tariffs would go into effect April 2nd. He's also imposed 10% tariffs on Chinese imports. All three countries have vowed retaliatory tariffs. The U.S. goods trade deficit with the European Union was $235 billion in 2024, a 13% increase over 2023. The Tax Foundation, a think tank in D.C., estimates that the imposed tariffs on China would reduce long-run GDP by 0.1%, and the proposed tariffs on Canada and Mexico by 0.3%, without taking into account retaliatory taxes by the countries. Economists say the sudden increase in costs for imported products would reignite inflation, which Trump campaigned on eliminating. But more importantly than reigniting inflation, these costs are all going to be largely passed on to the consumer, largely passed on to all of us. The rich are not going to be too impacted by them, but for average people, it's going to be really painful. But Trump doesn't care. They want hegemony. They want control of this globe. And that's what it comes down to for them, is just trying to have control of these nations. I mean, the proxy war in Ukraine, part of the reason for it was to separate Russia from Europe, thereby making Europe rely even more heavily on the United States. And it worked. That part of it worked. A lot of the proxy war has not worked, but that part of it worked. Separating Europe from Russia economically. Totally worked. And now most of Europe is just bending over for the United States, which is really sad to see. James wants to know, what does collapsing empire mean? Am I going to be shot in the street over a loaf of bread, or is Texas going to ally with Mexico because they can't afford an army of their own? I'd highly doubt the second one. So in a collapsing empire, the collapsing empires can go different ways. They can, and by the way, I don't have all the answers here, but it can collapse slowly, dwindle, where you just go from having a high standard of living and it slowly decreases. But, much of the society remains largely intact. Or it can go fast and miserably, where basically the systems collapse quickly and the systems of accountability collapse quickly. And then literally the guy on the block with the most guns is the winner. And I think we all hope that's not how it goes. But there is a very clear other direction that you could go with a collapsing empire. The United States could pull back a little bit, stop trying to own the world. We could cooperate with countries around the world in actual fair dealings, as opposed to bend to our will dealings. Much of what China has done in their cooperation with other nations has been work with them, like have economic deals with them that both benefit from. China, you'll notice, does not have 900 military bases around the world, because that is not how China achieves things. That is not how they go about things. The U.S. does have 900 military bases around the world, and we threaten other nations all the time. Sometimes we threaten them publicly. Sometimes we just quietly coup them. Sometimes we assassinate their leaders. Sometimes we try to coup them via economics. Sometimes we coup them via lawfare, as we've done recently in Pakistan, Argentina, Bolivia. Luckily, that one was undone. Brazil, luckily, that one was undone. But of course, the harm done in having a coup that lasts 4 years with Bolsonaro, God only knows the long list of harm that was done. So anyway, I'm just saying that we're in a planetary transition time right now, partially because of technology that is advancing exponentially, partially because of the dwindling of petroleum, of fossil fuels, which is connected to climate crisis happening all at once. We've got to get off of fossil fuels, and all that's connected also to the U.S. empire coming to an end, and also late stage capitalism. It's a poly crisis. No, we're going poly crisis. It's a poly crisis. And we get to live in this exciting time, guys. Isn't it so fun? We get this excitement. Imagine if you lived in the boring times of 100 years ago, or 500 years from now, when all humans just cooperate and share and have free love, and there hasn't been a murder around the world in 20 years, and just everything's grown in hydroponic farms that are like a block from your house and use 90% less water, and the animals are all just bustling. They're just happy. The birds are singing brighter. That's what we could be, but how boring would that be? That's not the exciting time to be alive. It's now, when everything's crashing down. Okay, hope that answered it. Kind of answered it. All right, I am going to wrap this up. For those of you who don't know, I have live streams 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Also had a special government secrets this morning, which you can also watch. But the most important thing is, along with those live streams, I have Unredacted Tonight, just been launched. Episode 2 is tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, or this afternoon, 4 p.m. Pacific. And number one thing you can do to support it is watch it and share it. That's number one. Number two is become a member at my locals page, leecamp.net, or at patreon.com/leecamp. And if you forget all of the links of how to watch Unredacted Tonight this evening, I try not to say tonight. It's too weird, too dumb. But anyway, if you forget all the other links, just go to my Linktree, linktree.com/leecamp. Okay. Anything else to tell you? I think that's it. Next live stream is Monday. If you enjoy this on podcasts, please give it a rating. Give it one of those 5-star ratings. It does help. And I'll see you 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. Keep fighting.
Well, brother, I salute you, though, man. You're one of the few that bring together this tremendous artistic talent and still be in such deep solidarity with oppressed people.
It's an honor to be here because I'll tell you, Lee, you have one of the funniest shows on television, bar none.
It's an enormous pleasure to be here. While I was waiting, I was leafing through your wonderful book.
Same to you. I love your show. Be happy to come back anytime.
Lee, this is one of the great honors of my long career, just to be in the same earth with you.
I'm sure.
We're just so blinded. We have so many blinders on because our society doesn't want us to know things. And so it takes shows like your show, and
it is clearly designed to eradicate.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey, Jill, how are you? Julian, thanks for joining me. Honor to have you, brother.
Consumerism is a theory that people should behave this way to help each other. It's not.
Mr. George Galloway, thank you so much for joining me in these dark times.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having me on. Keep fighting. Ha.